CDC is short for Cul de Canard, or French for butt of the duck. What makes CDC so special is in the way you can tie with it, its durability, ease in using it, its floatability, and probably most important of all, just how cheap it is. I mean, you can take a whole package of CDC and tie several dozen flies, say a size 20, versus buying an expensive dry fly neck. What makes CDC work so well is its air trapping qualities. Each one of these little fibers on here has some microbarbs on there. So when you clump it all together, it just creates tremendous air pockets in there, which gives the fly its floatability. It has nothing to do with the pruning gland oil that's impregnated in them. What the oil does do, though, it makes the feather more pliable and easy to work with. It also gives it a nice little sheen and glistens when you're out on the water, making it easier for the angler to see. Well, now we talked a little bit about the CDC feathers, why don't we sit down and tie a couple. One of the first flies I came up with when tying with CDC was a CDC Comparadun. The Comparadun style's been around for a while, and the ease with working with CDC lends itself nicely to this fly. The tails are Betts' tailing fibers. The body is a goose biot. The wing is CDC. And we have a little bit of a veiling of some mallard flank to give it some character, as well as some super fine dubbing for the thorax and head area. So let's give this thing a try. To start off with, we're going to use the Tiemco 101. And that's a hook I use for almost all my dry flies. I like the ring eye hook on it. We're going to fasten our thread right up in the thorax area. Trim off our thread. And then we're going to grab some of the tailing fibers. We're going to use the 5 Betts, or bar Betts. I generally like to have 3 to 4 fibers that stick out on each side. So we'll stick those off. We'll lay it up here alongside the hook shank and measure it for length. We want it to be about the length of the hook shank, and then we just start tying them on. And as I'm tying back, I'm pulling back on the fiber so they stay on top of the hook shank. I'll lift them up, kind of splay them out a little bit, or I can let the wind do it for me here. Then I just come in, and I'll do a series of figure 8s, just like so. One more time. Take a lock wrap, and one turn right underneath it to lift it up. That way we have a nice split tail without using a dubbing ball. We'll trim off our excess, and now we're ready for our body material. We're going to be using a goose biot. So we'll hold it up here and just peel one off. Now as soon as we peel one off, then we can see a little notch either on the top or the bottom of the biot. If the notch is on the top and we were to tie it in tip first and wrap it forward, we would have that fuzzy little rib. But since we want a nice smooth body, we're going to flip it over so that notch is always at the back. Now before we tie it in, I'm going to moisten it. Now it's ready to go, and I'll tie it in tip first. Wrap my thread forward, just up to the thorax area. I'll grab my hackle pliers. And that first wrap, we want to do it with our hands. And grab it with the hackle pliers, so everything's all in a line here. And we just start wrapping it forward. Nice even wraps. We want all those segmentations to be nice and even. And with each wrap, we're covering up this fuzzy little rib here. just like so. Get up to the thorax, tie it off, trim off our excess here. Tie it down real good, put down a little bit of a thread base. Then we'll come back, about a 1/16 or an 1/8 of an inch behind the eye of the hook. And this is where we're going to start tying in our wing and mallard flank bail material. So we'll pick up some of the mallard flank and we'll strip off this marabou part, get that out of there. Then we'll select several fibers of the flank, pull them together so they're nice and even at the tip. Just pull them off the stem. Group it all together. And then we're going to measure the length of it. We want the length to be the length of the hook shank. Come up here. We're going to tie it right on top of the hook shank. Take several turns of thread to make sure it's tied in there nice and good. Snip off the excess. Now we're ready to start working with some CDC. Since we're working outside here, it's a lot easier to keep them inside the package so they don't blow around too. It's also real handy having this third hand on AK's tying center to hold them when the wind comes up. We're going to use 4 of them for this size fly. Even up the tips. Then we just grab the tips. And as we do that, we're going to have a natural curve up or a curve down. When we tie them in, we want this curve to be up like this. So we'll stroke them all together here, just like so. Then we'll come up, tie it in so it's the same length as our mallard. Tie it in there just like that. Make sure it's tied right on top of the hook shank. Take several turns, make sure it's tied in there nice and tight. Trim off our excess. And then you always want to save this stuff. We can always use this for something else later down the road. Next, what we're going to do is add some dubbing to it. Take some out of the package. That ought to be enough. And we'll just kind of tease a little bit out here. I want to make sure it's, just put nice small amounts on here. So we have a nice thin thread layer here. Just a little bit more to start with. We'll give that a try right there. And then we'll just start wrapping it behind the wing. And what we're doing is just covering up where we tied off the Biot and the CDC, forming the back portion of our thorax. Then we'll kind of spread the CDC out a little bit. And then we'll reach in front of it. Just pull it straight back and push down a little bit. Then we'll just continue wrapping right in front of it, forming our head. And we'll eventually use the rest of this dubbing to push that wing back at an angle, so it looks a lot more like the natural on the water. Again, dub a little bit more on here. If we want that dubbing to be a little tighter, we can use Betts' dubbing wax here and put it on our fingers. Just go back over the dubbing, making that dubbing nice and tight. Pull that wing back again. Start wrapping. Wrap back in and onto the wing, just like so. And give it a check. Yep, it's angling back, so we have enough dubbing going backwards, so we'll come back forward, finish off right at the eye. Then we'll grab our whip finisher and tie off our thread here. Trim off our thread. Now the fly is completed. Before I take it out of the vise, what I like to do is give it a twist. Just make sure that wing is fanned out. Making sure I have CDC sticking out each side here, which is going to be our flotation part. And that we have enough up here on top to give the illusion of a wing. Out of all the flies that I tie, this is probably the most versatile one. When you get to the river, there's times when you'll find they're taking the mergers instead of the duns. So all you have to do with this fly is pull your wing together, give it a snip, and you have an instant emerger fly. It doesn't look as neat, but it doesn't make a bit of difference to the fish. Another little secret about fishing this Comparadun, say you get out on the river and you know there's got to be a fish at the end of a pool heading into a riffle or behind a rock, but it's just not coming up for the duns. More times than not, if you take a drowned dun, put a little split shot on it and sink it and fish it like a nymph, you'll catch your fish.